In June 2024 in Loranger, Louisiana, a small family fell into a tragedy that witnesses say will haunt them for the rest of their lives. In the same car ride, 6-year-old Jaylee survived as if by a miracle, while 4-year-old Aaron never came home. And the haunting question remains when disaster struck: where were the people who were supposed to protect them? This is the story of Callie Brunette and her 2 daughters, not only about a brutal crime, but also about warnings that rang out and then fell into silence. How many signals must be ignored before a child pays the price? What you are about to hear contains difficult truths drawn from official records, police reports, and trial proceedings. I share this story not to shock, but to educate, because understanding these warning signs could save a child's life tomorrow. As we examine this case, we will uncover the systemic failures that allowed this tragedy to unfold and explore the reforms needed to prevent such losses. The details ahead are challenging, but they carry lessons that may keep another family from enduring such devastation. Each missed opportunity, each warning ignored, represents a moment when intervention could have changed everything. This is not only a story of loss, it is a blueprint for how communities can better protect children. Every silence has meaning, do not overlook it. As we walk through this case, I ask you to consider not only the tragedy itself, but also the systems, decisions, and moments of inaction that enabled it. Together, we can turn grief into action, ensuring that the story of Callie and Aaron becomes a catalyst for change rather than just another forgotten headline. 4-year-old Aaron Brunette, lovingly called Little Sunshine by her mother, was the center of joy in their modest Loranger home, where the laughter of 2 sisters often drifted past the fence. Aaron often clutched the hand of her older sister, Jaylee, and together they sang children's songs, an image neighbors still remember: 2 little girls chirping in the yard, brimming with innocent life. Aaron's world was drawn in crayon sketches taped to the refrigerator bright yellow suns, a house with smoke rising from its chimney, stick figures holding hands. These little masterpieces were not just childhood play, but the simplest proof of a child's sense of safety, love, and trust in the world. Looking back, those drawings break hearts, because they stand as symbols of a life that should have been filled only with light. Her mother, Callie Brunette, was a single mother working tirelessly to provide for her daughters. Employment records show she often took double shifts at a restaurant, still striving to create stability for the girls. Co-workers recall how Callie kept a photo of her children in her apron pocket, pulling it out whenever exhaustion set in. Using it as the strength to keep going, people saw in her a devoted mother, willing to sacrifice everything for her children's happiness. Their small house was simple, but warm flower beds lined the walkway. Inside, the walls were filled with drawings and toys. It was this very sense of care that made the intrusion of violence into their home all the more devastating. In that family, Jaylee, 6 years old, always played the protector. Teachers described her as bright and helpful, often asking permission to take homework home to teach Aaron. The image of Jaylee holding her little sister's hand as they entered class, ordinary yet profound, became a symbol of sisterhood, later recalled with deep sorrow. From the outside, this seemed like an ordinary small family, facing financial struggles but full of love, but that very normalcy hid their fragility. The innocent laughter neighbors remembered when seen in the light of what followed became the last precious moments before darkness entered. Every tragedy begins with a turning point, one that those inside rarely recognize. For Callie and her daughters, that turning point had a name: 37-year-old Daniel Wayne Callahan. At first, he was only a familiar customer, but his growing presence would open the door to control and violence. Callahan entered their lives with the posture of a helpful man. He offered small gestures, fixing things around the house, buying gifts for the children, giving Callie a sense of temporary safety during her exhausting work days. This was the classic pattern experts call grooming building trust before gradually revealing control. Only later, when legal records from multiple jurisdictions were pieced together, did a troubling pattern emerge: past altercations, violations of protective orders, disorderly conduct. Each incident, taken alone, could be dismissed as a passing outburst, but scattered across locations, never connected into a single picture. They allowed Daniel Callahan to walk into a vulnerable family's life without a single official alarm being raised. His presence in the brunette home grew in ways that were difficult to notice. Neighbors recalled that at first he seemed friendly, but before long his demeanor shifted irritable, prone to outbursts over trivial matters. One witness described how children's crying and adult shouting began to echo more frequently in recent weeks. Around that same time, Callahan's car appeared outside the home at unusual hours, sometimes staying overnight while Callie worked late shifts. Financial pressure had long weighed on Callie living costs, bills, or raising children alone. Callahan understood those vulnerabilities and slowly turned them into tools of control. Evidence later recovered from Callie's social media accounts showed messages sent in her name, asking relatives for money. The wording mimicked Callie's style, even her usual emojis, but investigators determined they were sent by Callahan. This takeover of communication was not just digital intrusion. It marked escalation, isolating her from her support network. From the outside, the community only saw fragments shouting, changes in the family's routine, the increasingly constant presence of a strange man, yet no one reported. A neighbor later admitted to investigators that they considered calling Child Protective Services but decided against it, not wanting to cause trouble for a single mother. That silence, the gap between observation and action, became a critical link in the chain of failure. Later, when the truth came out, the pattern was unmistakable: grooming, control, isolation, escalation. But at the time, no system connected the dots, and by the time the last alarm bells rang, it was already too late. Every tragedy reaches a stage where danger signals are no longer hidden. For the Brunette family, that moment arrived in early June 2024. What once seemed like isolated oddities began to fit together into a clear pattern of escalation. The Facebook messages sent from Callie's account were the first red flag. At first, they seemed simple. Casual requests, "Can you cash app me $20 for gas?" But then they grew unusual. The messages multiplied, with ready-made excuses to avoid direct contact. The kids are sick, don't want to spread it, in reality, at the very same time. Neighbors saw Jaylee and Aaron playing outside, healthy and laughing. The contradiction revealed something chilling. Someone was fabricating a false front, with the goal of cutting this family off from support. Alongside those cold messages came changes in the children. In class, Jaylee, the once outgoing older sister, now lowered her head, avoiding her friend's eyes. Aaron, her mother's little sunshine, began having bathroom accidents during school hours, a sign child psychologists recognize as a clear stress response. To her teachers, it was dismissed as an adjustment problem. Another alarm bell rang and fell silent. The deeper one looks, the more disturbing the details become. Small animal cages appeared in Callahan's backyard and even in his truck. At first glance, they seemed harmless, but later, investigators shuddered. Were they for pets, or something darker? That question turned those wire cages into a chilling symbol of a calculated plan far beyond momentary anger. Neighbors saw and heard once. They witnessed Callahan gripping Jaylee's arm, dragging her into the house as she sobbed. Another time, they saw him screaming at Callie behind the wheel while the children stood at the window, watching. Each incident, if taken alone, might look like a bad day, but together, they painted a vivid picture of imminent danger. What we've just heard is not only the story of one family, it illustrates a broader truth when warning signs are ignored. Violence has room to escalate. Remember this: fabricated messages cutting off contact, sudden changes in children, unusual items in a home, neighbors' silence. All of these are indirect cries for help. If you ever encounter them, treat them as such. By June 2024, the countdown clock was running faster than ever. Court records show a series of Facebook messages sent to Callahan's sister. On the surface, they look like ordinary requests from a struggling single mother. "Really need help. Dan's taking me to an interview tomorrow, but we're out of gas. Can you send $40? But in reality, those words were not Callie's. They were typed by Callahan, mimicking her style, even her familiar emojis, creating the illusion that everything was fine. Seemingly harmless lines became a mask for danger, and later, evidence of complete isolation. If there is one lesson here, it is this: when you suspect a child may be unsafe, Speak up. A mistaken call might be a minor inconvenience. A missed call can cost a life. In Loranger, hesitation turned into tragedy. Neighbors heard the crying more often. A retired teacher recalled that Erin no longer played in the front yard. I thought she was just getting shy. But looking back, I'd seen this sign dozens of times in my 30 years teaching. I should have known. Another neighbor saw Callahan loading those small animal cages onto his truck. Inside the house, two little faces pressed against the window, Jaylee crying. Erin standing motionless. Something felt wrong, he remembered. But I told myself it wasn't my business. Maybe they were getting rid of pets. I didn't want to be a nosy neighbor. Anonymous reporting systems, 247 hotlines. Online forums exist for moments exactly like this, but systems only work when communities know about them and are willing to use them. In this case, everyone held a piece of the puzzle, the crying, the behavior changes, the fake messages put together. It was a clear picture of danger, but silence meant the pieces were never connected. By the time recognition finally came, it was too late. The painful truth is that in tragedies like this, silence is not merely inaction, it is complicity. Every time someone turns away, every time someone says it's probably fine, it pushes children deeper into danger. Protective systems can exist on paper, but without voices from the community, alarm bells fall into a void. Looking back, the signs were all there. They were not hidden, not subtle. They were simply ignored, and for children like Erin and Jaylee, timely intervention is not optional, it is the only lifeline. The question for us is this next time. When you hear a cry in the night, will you stay silent or will you be the one who calls? By mid-June 2024, the danger reached its catastrophic conclusion. The following account comes from court records and official statements, clinical truths that, while difficult to absorb, carry lessons that may prevent future tragedies. They are shared not for shock, but because understanding the progression of violence helps communities recognize when intervention matters most. The sequence began on June 12, 2024, according to the timeline established by investigators. Callahan arrived at the Brunette home in the morning, after Callie had already left for her early shift. Surveillance footage from a nearby business captured his truck on the road at 6:47 a.m. What unfolded in the following hours would devastate a family and stun a community. When Callie returned home around 2 p.m., she walked into a trap. Court documents state that Callahan attacked her immediately upon entry, giving her no chance to defend herself or protect her children. The medical examiner's report, though avoiding graphic detail, recorded the assault as swift and overwhelming. The clinical language of the legal record cannot soften the reality a mother's life was taken while her daughters were inside, their safety suddenly in the hands of the man responsible for her death. What followed revealed the calculated nature of Callahan's actions. He forced both children into Callie's vehicle, along with the small animal cages that had appeared in the weeks prior. Later, Jaylee told investigators that Callahan claimed they were going to see their mom at work, a lie designed to prevent resistance or cries for help. This psychological manipulation highlighted a particularly cruel element of crimes against children, weaponizing their trust and innocence against them. Callahan then transported both children across the state line into Mississippi, a federal crime that later shaped the prosecution's strategy. The journey from Loranger to Jackson was about 100 miles, during which both children were trapped with the man who had killed their mother. On that journey, the life of 4-year-old Erin ended through violence the medical examiner classified as asphyxiation. Forensic evidence confirmed the intentional nature of the act, with investigators concluding it likely occurred in the woods outside Jackson. Even silence itself deserves scrutiny because inaction allowed hours to slip away. Between the crime and its discovery lay a window for possible intervention. Callie's employer grew concerned when she failed to show up for her evening shift and could not be reached, yet they assumed she was handling a family emergency and did not contact authorities immediately. It was not until Callie's sister, alarmed by strange Facebook messages and unable to reach her by phone, drove to the house that the crime came to light. The scene that greeted her was one of unmistakable violence. The door stood ajar, signs of struggle immediately visible. She dialed 911 at 8:34 p.m., triggering a massive search that spanned 2 states and involved dozens of law enforcement agencies. Looking back, this was not only a heartbreaking case, But a warning: domestic violence and child abuse rarely appear suddenly. They escalate through small signals, cries, unusual silences, inconsistent messages, and when communities dismiss them, the golden hours for intervention vanish forever. When relatives entered the small house in Loranger and found Callie dead, everything changed instantly. This was no longer a single homicide, but a race against time to locate two missing children. The Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office mobilized every available resource. Sheriff Daniel Edwards later admitted from the very first moment, they knew this was the worst-case scenario: a killer still at large and two children in immediate danger. Before going further, it's important to prepare. The details that follow are not easy to hear, but only by facing them can we understand how violence escalates and how to recognize it earlier elsewhere. The Amber Alert went out at 9:15 p.m., broadcasting Callahan's image and the two girls across every medium. Within less than an hour, information about the 2007 Chrysler Sebring had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. This was proof that when the community is mobilized, it can become the most critical link in saving a child's life. Because the crime had crossed state lines, the FBI immediately joined the case. The Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team was activated, pairing with digital forensic data. Cell tower pings, traffic camera images, gas receipts, all were strung together into a northbound trail. These were not just technical clues, they were evidence that the girls were still alive at specific moments, and each passing minute was another narrowing chance. At 11:47 p.m., a driver recognized the vehicle from the alert. Jackson police attempted to intercept, but Callahan fled, leading to a high-speed chase through residential neighborhoods. This was more than reckless flight. It exposed the desperate, calculated mindset of a man who had gone too far, willing to gamble the children's lives for a few more minutes of freedom. The chase ended when the car crashed into woods off the highway. Inside, Jaylee was found alive. She sat silent, eyes wide, speaking no words. Paramedics called it the silence of shock, a common trauma response in children who endure overwhelming violence. At 6 years old, Jaylee had survived, but the psychological cost she carried would take years to heal. For the investigators present, the moment felt like a small miracle in the darkness. In a case where all signs pointed to the worst, finding Jaylee alive proved that even in the bleakest hours, life can cling to a fragile thread. Yet that miracle also begged a question: how do we ensure we never have to rely on miracles at all? Search teams expanded the perimeter immediately, and while everyone could guess what they were about to find, the reality still left even veteran investigators shaken. Not far from the crash site, under thermal imaging equipment, Erin's body was discovered in the woods. A 4-year-old girl, once called Little Sunshine, was now another victim of neglect and violence. The discovery left a lasting impact. Even seasoned investigators required counseling afterward. This was not just another finding in a case. It was a bitter reminder: if we ignore warnings, if communities stay silent, tragedy will always find a way to repeat itself, and no child should ever pay with their life for that delay. In this case, the cost was already beyond repair. After the long night ended with a chase and a rescue that was only half a miracle, all eyes turned to the courtroom. If the crime scene revealed brutality, the trial exposed another truth: the human nature of the man behind it. Daniel Wayne Callahan entered in a prison jumpsuit, yet carried himself as someone still trying to control the narrative, without remorse, without evasion. He used the media's cameras to declare, "I did it. I was fully aware. I knew exactly what I was doing." These were not just confessions, they were the cold proclamations of a man determined to be remembered, even through violence. Forensic psychiatrists identified this as a classic marker of antisocial personality disorder: no remorse, no empathy, craving attention. Their conclusion was clear: Callahan was competent to stand trial, meaning this was not blind impulse or drug-induced delirium. It was a choice. Beside him loomed another shadow: Victoria Cox, 33. She claimed she was coerced, yet strings of messages, DNA evidence, and even Jaylee's testimony showed undeniable involvement. The question before the jury was no longer guilty or not, but how deep did her complicity run? In August 2025, Callahan agreed to plead guilty. The death penalty was taken off the table in exchange for life without parole. Legally, it was a resolution, but for the community, It sparked debate: was a lifetime sentence truly justice? Or does justice begin the moment someone hears a child's cry through a wall and decides to call for help? The most heartbreaking moment did not come from the indictment, but from the family's bench. Callie's mother, facing the man who killed her daughter and granddaughter, spoke with a trembling but steady voice. "You didn't just kill Callie and Aaron, you broke an entire family." Every night Jaylee wakes screaming, asking why her mom and sister left without her. That is something no verdict can mend: a life sentence imposed not on the killer, but on the surviving child. This was more than a case. It was a mirror held up to a system that only acts after blood is spilled. A court can close files and pronounce sentences, but it cannot return a mother, nor bring back a 4-year-old girl. The lesson is heavy but simple: never let the courtroom be the only place where children are protected. True justice must begin in the community, with eyes that do not turn away, with a call placed when something feels wrong, with the courage to act on instinct. If we wait for justice to walk into a courtroom, it will already be too late. But if we act on the first signs, a child's life may yet be saved. Whenever tragedies like the Brunette families occur, the question follows: how could this happen right in front of us? With no one stopping it, the answer is never a single failure. It is a chain of small gaps linked together into a system that stayed silent. Records show Callahan's prior arrests for violence, restraining order violations, disorderly conduct, but scattered across multiple counties. No one saw the whole picture. Each incident looked like just another outburst, then faded. This was not merely record-keeping failure, but the absence of a system strong enough to connect scattered dots into one unified warning. On another level, the community also faltered. Neighbors heard crying, saw changes in the children's faces, but told themselves maybe it's not serious. A retired teacher admitted 30 years in the classroom: "I'd seen these signs before. I should have known." Fear of being wrong, fear of being intrusive, that hesitation turned into silence. And silence, here, meant loss. Child protection workers faced their own burden. Many carried 30-40 active cases, double the recommended caseload. Under crushing pressure, subtle warning signs slipped away. It wasn't that they didn't care. The system had turned them into late-stage firefighters instead of early preventers. Looking back, the chain is bitterly clear: fragmented laws, shallow background checks, community silence, overburdened social workers, layer after layer, until a child paid the final price. The lesson is not only about catching perpetrators. Justice in court came too late for Callie and Aaron. The real question is, how do we prevent the next trial? Unless we build a new system, one that connects data, supports social workers, and empowers communities to speak up, history will repeat itself. And next time, it could be another family, right on your street. 3 days after the tragedy, hundreds of candles lit up the park in Laranja. It was not only a vigil for Callie and Aaron, but a promise to Jaylee that she would not be left alone. From that light, action spread. A therapy fund for Jaylee, quick catching perpetrators. Justice in court came too late for Callie and Aaron. The real question is, how do we prevent the next trial? Unless we build a new system. But the greatest lesson did not come from numbers or legislation. It came from the silence beforehand. Each scattered sign crying, fake messages, controlling behavior could have been a chance to intervene. If even one person had spoken up, the outcome might have been different. Therapy fund for Jaylee, quick catching perpetrators.
But they're experiencing neglect, abuse, or exploitation while we go about our daily. The warning signs are often subtle: a child who seems overly eager to stay after school, who hoards food, who flinches at sudden movements, or who knows things no child should know. These signs don't always mean abuse, but they always deserve attention from training.
We've examined the warning signs that preceded this tragedy: domestic violence history inadequately tracked, financial vulnerability exploited by predators, community observations that never reached authorities, and digital intrusions that masked escalating danger. Each represents an opportunity for intervention that was missed but need not be missed again. The justice system's response, while ensuring Callahan will never harm another child, cannot restore what was lost. True justice lies in preventing future tragedies through the reforms we've discussed: comprehensive background checks, Community education about warning signs, enhanced child protective services, and interagency coordination that connects scattered concerns into actionable intelligence.
The Cordell children's story isn't unique. Similar tragedies unfold across America every day. What makes this case significant is that it was finally discovered, finally prosecuted, and finally ended for every case that comes to light. Remember the courage of that 16-year-old girl who spoke up despite years of conditioning to stay silent. Her bravery saved 6 siblings and potentially other children who might have crossed the Cordell's path. If a traumatized teenager could find such courage, surely we can find the courage to make a phone call when we see something concerning. The light for future safety comes not from dramatic rescues, but from ordinary people paying attention, asking questions, and refusing to look away when something seems wrong. It comes from systems that prioritize children's safety over all other considerations. Most importantly, it comes from communities that understand protecting children.
Every child deserves to grow up safe, loved, and protected. That's not just an ideal, it's an achievable goal if we all commit to vigilance, education, and action. The memory of Callie and Aaron demands nothing less.